Hey guys, welcome to part 1 of a 3-part series here. We're building a sideboard buffet. So I've safely broken down the sheets of plywood into more manageable sizes, and now I'll cut them to the exact size that I need here on the table saw. These parts I'm cutting now are going to be the sides and the back and the stretchers of the carcass. Now I need to cut dados in the sides, so I'm going to be using a dado bit in my router, and I made a sacrificial fence. This way I can measure down exactly where I need and ride the router along the fence, and I can do this a lot safer than I can do it on the table saw with the dado blade because of the height of the side. Now I'm going to attach the top stretchers, and also they're going to be the supports for the top, the butcher block top, and I'm going to use pocket screws to install those. Okay, so now I have all the parts cut except for the bottom stretcher shelf, which is going to help me house the drawers. Now, to get an accurate measurement, what I do is a quick mock-up. I have everything dry clamped together. There's no glue and there's no screws or anything like that, no nails. And the reason for that is because I want to stain every panel before I assemble it, so that later on, if it was assembled first, then I have to use a brush to get in the corners, and then either you see brush strokes or any wood movement would allow, then you'd get a piece of unfinished plywood or solid wood. So always pre-stain the panels beforehand. So what I did was I had the dados cut here, so just to make sure with the dry fit that everything's good and square, now I can measure and get an accurate reading here for this bottom shelf. And now I'll go ahead and pre-stain all the panels before I assemble them. Now if I let the stain penetrate for about 2 minutes, I like to wipe off any excess that might have puddled up on top or caused any streaks. And what this will do will give me a nice even coat all along. Okay, now I've pre-stained all the panels, and it's an oil-based stain, so I'm going to let it sit overnight to dry. Once it's dry, because it takes 24 hours when you're using an oil-based, then I'll be able to assemble everything. Once I assemble it, I'll be able to have it set up standing on the work table, and then I'll be able to stain the actual backside of it. Alright, so now that everything's dry on the inside, which I only stain the inside of the panels for the corners, I'm going to assemble it, and then I'm going to put the stretchers on the top and also the stretcher for the bottom of the drawer housing here, and then I'll be able to turn it on its front, drop it down, and stain the whole outside of it. The reason I have everything set up here like this is I'm holding it by the clamps to make it easier for me, and I'm going to tack it together with some 18 gauge brad nails, and then I'm going to drill and counterbore some holes, screw it together because this is going to be a heavy unit, and then I'm going to plug those holes up with some dowels and finish sand those. That's why I haven't stained the outside yet. That was the main reason, because once I cut those dowels flush, if they're glued in, hiding the screw holes, then I need to sand them and make sure that I fill any little gaps. Then I can stain everything so it can totally hide the screws completely. You won't see any plugs at all. Now that I have the sides and the back assembled, I'll use pocket screws and I'll attach the top stretchers. Now I flip the unit on its back, and I'm installing the bottom drawer shelf. And what this is going to do is not only give me a good square up of the unit itself and add strength, but I'm also going to have it as a platform for the bottom of the drawers to use the tracks to ride on. And now I'll just fill these holes for the screws with some plugs, and I'll use oak dowels, and I'll make the direction of the grain go the same direction as the actual plywood itself. This way, once I sand it, everything's completely hidden. Now that the glue's set up, I'm just going to trim everything flush, sand it down nice, and then once the stain goes on, this will virtually disappear. Now I'm going to mill up some red oak and cover up those front of the plywood edges with rails and stiles, and on both sides I want to put some thicker column style legs. Now the parts I'm cutting now are approximately 1 inch thick, and these are going to be the column style side legs, and they're going to be a little heavy because I want the rails and stiles to be recessed a little bit. I want those to protrude forward and give a kind of a nice shadow line. Now to create that column effect on the leg, I lowered my blade to just about less than 1/4 of an inch, and what I'm doing is running a groove all around the leg here to create that column style, give it a little depth and a little detail. Now using a series of French curves, I came up with a little style of a bun foot here, and I'm going to cut that out on the bandsaw. Okay, so now that I have the legs cut, these are the legs, pretty bright in here with those lights, and you can't see, I have the nice cutout here that establishes kind of a column look, and on the bottom we cut a profile, which is what they wanted, which is kind of like a foot, almost like a bun foot at the bottom, and have that nice column edge cut off right there. We established a base, and what I'm going to do now is fix these to the front. Okay, so now that the columns are installed on the sides, what I'm going to do is install the rails and the stiles, and you'll see the difference in thickness here because these are 3/4 as opposed to the columns, which are 1 inch. And it just makes a really nice shadow line, and it shows a little depth to the project. Okay, so now that I have everything assembled, I can stain the front panels and the rails and the stile and the legs and get that all done, let that dry. This way I can start to apply polyurethane. It's oil stained, so it'll take 24 hours to dry, so this is a process. It does take a lot of time. Now I can take a dry rag and just wipe off any excess stain after I let it sit for a minute or two. Okay guys, so I'm going to make this the end of part 1 because that's all I'm going to get to this week. I want to make in the next video a separate video on the drawers, and then the last part of the video is going to be the butcher block style top. And then I'm going to finish the whole thing with an oil-based wipe-on varnish. The reason I don't want to do that right away is because I'm going to have a lot of dust in the shop when I cut the rest of the parts. I don't want any debris or anything getting inside that finish. Alright guys, so just make sure you subscribe. Thanks for joining me this week, and I'll see you next time in the shop.